Welcome back, viewers. It's James Kam, your half-assed reporter, the guy on the bike. I'm sorry for my hiatus, but I'm welcoming you back for what I think is the 16th season of the Kalm Reports. And I don't think I could come up with a better, more auspicious premiere episode for this season. We're gonna run into Hauser Wirth. Got a super duper duper treat. We're gonna look at a show by Philip Guston, 1969 to 1979. Okay, alright, well, so James Kam.
Here's a press card.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll do our little sweep of the installation. Look at the wall notes. Oh boy. The show is just on this floor? Is it another floor? Just this floor. Daughter. Musa? Oh, okay. All right, well, we're going to try to get in and capture a little bit of Philip's daughter's statements.
Next to it is vacuum 2, which has been spoken about as a name about his father, who was an immigrant from the Ukraine, and who ultimately took his own life in despair in California, unable to find work. But I think you can look at it, I'm looking at it at this point in time as a sort of allegory of the immigrant, particularly resonant at this moment. There are themes that run through these works, not only relate, but you'll also see a picture with rain, burning rain, fire, rain again, in a couple of the different paintings. And I think that represents, obviously, that's an apocalyptic vision that appears. I think we all contemplate the state of the world and have those fears. And I think that's part of why his paintings haven't been warmly received, or certainly weren't when they were first painted and shown, but also why they now seemingly respond to a particularly fraught moment that we're in now, and to the fears that we may have. There is something deeply comforting in a way when we see a reflection of our fears. And when we also see it dealt with, there is comedy in the midst of tragedy. There is the light that is the light, that it is still possible to create next to the abyss, or while contemplating the abyss. And I think maybe that's enough for me to say right now. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I remember your lovely memoir, which I read some years ago, so I remember great precision. I'm just curious about your personal memories of experiencing your work when you were younger. These obviously dated pictures of the subject and scale. And I'm curious about what your personal relationship was with that as you experienced that. How did you appreciate that?
Well, I didn't really have a chance to see these works for the most part until they were shown in 1980 in San Francisco. at my father's for the first retrospective of his late work that took place shortly before his death. There were a couple of occasions during the 1970s, this period, where I was invited into his studio. But honestly, he was working with such intensity during that time that I didn't see much of him. I didn't know what to make of him when I first saw him, just like everybody else, you know. But I knew that I was in the presence of something powerful. I just didn't really understand. Maybe that's not the right word to use, because they're so complex and there are so many layers of meaning that I think there is no simple understanding. So I knew something serious was going on for sure. Thank you. Yes?
What do you think your father would have thought about the cancellations and the postponed shows that have happened in the last year and a half?
It wouldn't have surprised him. He knew that he was working on something in his studio that was not acceptable, that was difficult, that was challenging. Which is not to say he would have taken what happened with equanimity, because that wasn't his temperament. My guess is he would have just canceled the whole thing.
Thank you.
But I am not him, and so we decided to go forward. And we very much look forward to the retrospective when it happens. And hopefully we'll be free enough of the virus by then that people will be able to see it without all the restrictions. Yes?
Sort of following on that, I teach college students in New Jersey, and we had a discussion last year where all the articles came out, and some of the students are quite upset about the Klan imagery. These are students in about 20 years old, and so I just wondered what you would suggest in terms of addressing their disturbance.
Right. Well, I hesitate to use the word context or history, but I think an understanding of his earliest work depicting the Klan and of his long history of opposition to any form of intolerance and injustice would be relevant. I know it's not fashionable today or accepted today by some that one would need to have context, but to not do that is to sort of banish from the walls of galleries and museums anything that might upset anybody. So I think we want art to engage us and disturb us and to have a chance to talk about it and think through it as we grapple with it. And if there ever was an artist who demanded that, it's got to be Philip Guston, I think. Anyone else?
So, Musa, I remember once talking to Lori Astor about her first book, Yes But. And I remember asking her whether it had references at all to Curator, famous philosophical book, Either Or. And she said that yes, they talk about Curator a great deal, because Guston was a very well-read painter. His love for philosophy is equally that of his love for poetry. So I wonder, one has to do with structured language, and the other one, two thinking process, which is what philosophy is. And then poetry demands a different kind of context and processes altogether. So how much the philosophical interest and the poetry, which is later much known through his relationship with all kinds of poets, whether it's Benjamin Kunis, Philip Guston.
Right, well, I think many of the poets of my father's generation, as well as my father, were deeply influenced by existential philosophy, particularly. And he read deeply in Sartre and Kierkegaard and Kalm. There was much in these philosophers' work that appealed to him in terms of and I also think of Beckett, the courage and the futility at the same time of the creative enterprise, or of the enterprise of living itself, in the face of the inevitability of death and the cruelty in the world. I think this is something that my father felt deeply throughout his life, and I think he revered poetry, or some poetry, as being able to capture the essence of that without describing it explicitly. If you know what I mean. Yeah.
Thank you, Musa. Let's look, shall we?
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Feel free to come up to me with questions or comments.
Thank you. Well, that was nice. Musa is a wonderful, very generous, approachable person. I've gone to a couple of other symposiums with her. We're going to start out looking at this piece. It's titled Open Window 2. This is one of the older pieces in the show. This is 1969. This is 32 by 40, and I also think this is perhaps the smallest piece in the show. Well, I probably became aware of the work of Philip Guston maybe in the mid-60s, late 60s. And I think part of that was that I was a kid in high school, and I was also involved in the subculture, the youth culture of the time. I ran away to San Francisco in the summer of 1968, and I was also a big fan of underground comics. And they were kind of pushing, or at least they were aware of Guston as an artist, but as also an artist that was peripherally connected to the underground cartoon thing. I think a lot of people think that Guston was influenced by Crazy Cat, and I can't remember the name of the artist that penned the Crazy Cat, and also the whole Robert Crumb, S. Clay Wilson, all those guys were getting a lot of attention. This is Riding Around, 54 by 79. Oh, this is a iconic piece. The Studio. Well, I've often been thinking about the perfect size for an easel painting. You know, not too big, not too small. And I think I saw a photo recently of a guy who is about as close to being a Philip Guston super fan as you can get. Claude Reich, I believe he was standing in front of this painting, or maybe another painting, about the same size, and I was looking at just the proportion and thought, God, I'd love to know what size that is. So it's 48 by 42. Well, I think Guston in a lot of ways is unique in that not only was he a great painter, but he also had enough gumption, courage, stubbornness to make changes, to flip from one style to another, to kind of go against the powers that be, and kind of turn his back on a lot of opportunities and other things that you're able to take advantage of when you're part of the status quo. It's titled A Day's Work. Okay, so I'm noticing that all the paintings here in the front galleries all have the hooded figures, the Ku Klux Klan figures. Well, these images of the hooded figures, I didn't want to bring it up when I was talking to Musa, but these are the images that have brought out the cancel culture, the people that have pushed to have his retrospectives indefinitely postponed. I'm also noticing that these paintings are a lot, at least parts of them are a lot thinner than I thought, but he's still a pretty physical painter. And I'm also thinking that a lot of this is very alla prima. You know, he knew how to lay in his basic ground of paint and kind of scrape out or slather his other images across the top of that. And he's also received some criticism as being a colorist. I think the joke was that he had pink eye, but even though he does kind of push his palette to the reds and the warms and the pink side of the spectrum, he always is good at kind of playing in these things like that shot of green there. And then this orange. This is 78 by 109 inches. Well, I came in last night and was pedaling around Chelsea and came over and decided I would do a little undercover work, so I stuck my camera up through the window grates and took a picture, a scan of this before anybody else was able to get a view of this. It's titled Blackboard. I was just talking with Jason Andrews, who is he's handling the estate of Elizabeth Murray now, but we were both saying that this is a wonderful painting and we had never seen this reproduced or exhibited before. Okay, so that's interesting. He's got this seam here stretched. This is a big painting. 79 5/8 by 112. So that's 8 by 9.5 feet, something like that. Also, I think Guston kind of broke in the scene as a second generation abstract expressionist. I guess it would be a lot of fine category slicing. Some people called him an abstract impressionist, but he was of a generation of painters that came after the Pollocks and the Clifford Stills and the Barnett Newmans. But I think he was basically the same age as Pollock. I think they were friends in high school. And they're calling this a blackboard. This is the kind of juicy painting that I remember. Although I'm looking at this and thinking that gosh, there's a certain amount of cracking in there. And well, they're talking about blackboards. I've been doing some research on Joseph Beuys lately, and he did a whole series of pieces on blackboards. Okay, let's go in and check out the second gallery. Okay. Well, these are the late pieces. We'll go over and capture a view of the wall text here. Okay, I'm not going to stay here for 10 minutes, but you can pause this and read it. This is titled On the Edge, and I think that might be the title of the show. This is interesting. This is probably the most minimal of all the paintings in the show, and I'm looking at this and thinking of people like Milton Resnick, and even some early Bryce Mardens. Well, yes, I think Philip Guston was born in Canada, and at some point he and his family immigrated to Los Angeles. We heard a little bit about some of the tragedies when Musa was talking about her grandfather's suicide. This is 79 by 91. I think all these are from pretty much the last 1 or 2 years. And I think at this point, people had sort of gotten over the initial shock of Guston going from abstract impressionism to kind of a goofy, cartoony, neo-expressionistic figure style. It's titled Solitary 2. And, well, in the little bit of studying that I've done, I guess that is there some kind of text that has been painted out there? Maybe not. Guston and Jackson Pollock went to the same high school, and I guess at some point they got kicked out for handing out subversive literature. They had some kind of student newspaper that was tweaking the wrong people. This is 68 by 80. Anyway, they didn't let Pollock go back to school, but Philip somehow was able to wangle his way back in. It's titled Back View 2, 1978. This is 73 by 81. Anyway, Pollock takes off goes to New York to be with his brothers. I think Philip stays in California for a while longer, and at some point he briefly, I think, goes to New York but ends up getting a job at a university somewhere in the Midwest. So while a lot of this stuff was cooking with abstract expressionism and action painting and all that, he was kind of isolated, although I'm sure he came into town and checked out the museums and things like that on occasion. Okay, I'm looking at this and thinking, okay, they're talking about a back view. A back view of what? We've got our little legs and trash can lids. These are all like signature motifs. It's titled Studio in Small Town. And we were talking about this during the panel discussion. So I believe it wasn't until maybe 1953-54 that Guston was able to move to New York full time. And he was kind of on the periphery of action painting and I don't know what you would call it, a softening of abstract expressionism. He was doing his large fields, and he talked about making them like you would stuff a pillow. But he always had a great sense of his materials and the imagery. He was talking about the color thing a little bit, and although you've got this kind of grayed down pink atmospheric thing, it's amazing how these little shots of orange here make that door look like yellow ochre. This is titled Tears. .68 by 114. So that's a big painting. I think when I was in Germany, I met some German artists. One of them has become a very good friend, Wolfgang Petrik, and he, of course, is friends with George Baschlitz and Lupertz and Immendorf and all those people. And he told me that all of the, well, not all of them, but a lot of the German painters that went on to become the Neue Wilden, the Neo-Expressionists, the trans-avant-garde people, saw, I think it was a show that was put together by the Museum of Modern Art, something like 18 Americans or something. One of the big, I guess what you would have to call a propaganda events, I think it was 1957, but he said that he and all of his friends saw the show, and a lot of them, particularly George Baschlitz, saw the Guston paintings, although they were abstract. They took note of the materiality and the fact that he was dealing with kind of tonal things, and well, a few years pass and then they start to see Guston as reintroducing figuration, and they'd been doing the same thing, but in a certain way, I think, and this is why I kind of think Guston represents a paradigm shift, is that once someone like Philip Guston goes back to figuration, that it kind of gives approval to everybody else. And at that point, a lot of the Germans decided that they could also go back and start digging into Expressionism. And, well, due to World War II and the rise of the National Socialists, a lot of that work had been short-circuited. So, yeah, they were ready to pick up whatever influences they could, wherever they could. This is titled Sleeping, 1977. I like this one. This is titled Entrance. Okay, here we go. I see these little beetles here on the bottom of the picture plane. That was the series of work that I first saw in person at the it's David McKay Gallery. This is 68 by 80. And, well, that was a stunner. I've been looking at these pictures in Art Forum or Art in America. And then I actually had a chance to go in and see them in real life. And I've been a Guston, hardcore Guston fan ever since. But I think at that point also he had become very influential for a whole generation of young New York painters, people like Julian Schnabel, Elizabeth Murray, George Condo, Jean-Michel Basquiat. So this is interesting to note. There's a lot of scraping in here. Those little white lines have been scraped in there. Okay, and his beetles. Well, I remember them talking about them as dung beetles. It's titled Night Room. Actually, this last series of works is pretty interesting. In certain ways, it's more minimal. I think the narratives have been limited, and a lot of the figurative elements, these disembodied legs, have become more like elements in a still life. Though he uses that for a great reason to do some juicy painting. And again, his little shots of contrasting color in there is nice. Okay, well, they're getting ready to throw everybody out. I better hurry up. This is Ancient Wall. (80 by 93 and 5/8). This is from the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, Smithsonian Institute, Washington, D.C. I was thinking I'd seen this before. So I have been trying to capture as many Guston exhibitions as I can. I started probably about 13 or 14 years at David McKay. You can go back and check the files. I have people that tell me they've watched them dozens of times. I do regret the fact that probably within about 6 months of the time that I started the Kalm Report, they had a Major Guston retrospective at the Met. And I still think back and wish that I would have recorded that, or at least some of that, because it really went through the whole trajectory of his career. And from the earliest kind of almost political cartoon-like things to his paintings of children playing with wooden swords and garbage can lids, through the abstract impressionism and everything else. Oh boy. Bug on wall. As I was saying, it seems like as he's progressing, he's getting more minimal, boiling it down. The actual narrative, the figurative parts are becoming more pathetic. And again, he's someone that was very aware of what art was, what painting was. He's constantly referring to stretched canvases, paintings, the frame here, the nail, the picture hanging wire. We've got our little bug. I've got some water bugs myself at the loft, but I'm not going to ask them to pose for me. This is another classic piece. Pittore, I guess that might be Italian for paint, maybe, I don't know. So I was talking about his use of color and his imagery. This kind of boils it all down. 72 by 80. So that's 6 by 6.5 feet. That's actually a big painting. And they were talking about him constantly kind of referring again to himself. So we got the bean head with the cigarette. We've got the clock and the bed. Got his palette and brush. We're going to wrap up looking at this piece. It's titled The Painter's Hand. This is 1975. Well, he has reduced it down to just, and I was talking about this little stretched canvas. His grimy painter hand sort of positing this, holding it out for the public. I was going to say the other thing that is interesting is I think the last Philip Guston show that I tried to cover here at Hauser Wirth at one of their other locations, I was came to the opening and well, I was escorted out and they told me no video was allowed Although you can go back and check it out. I think it's Philip Guston, 1963 to 67, so it'll be a show that would feature the work that happened just before this. Anyway, I'm glad you came along with me for this. As I said, I think this is 16 years of the Kalm Report. So you can like this. Share. Post it to all your social media sites. And you can leave your thoughts, ideas, comments, criticisms, and reviews below. I would like to thank all of our longtime viewers and everybody else out there in the big painting world who have been watching and supporting me for these many years. But of course, the first person and the last person we always like to say thank you to is Kate. So, thank you, Kate. I like the John Michel Basquiat shirt.
Thank you very much.
That's nice.
With the neighborhood.
Sure does, man. Sure does.